Hello everyone. Every page tells a new story. Welcome to the world of endless animation. The movie Son of the Mask begins in Georgia, USA. We see Dr. Leo going on a museum tour. Dr. Leo starts talking about the mask and says, whoever wears this mask will have special abilities. This mask was made by the evil god Loki, who was mischievous and aimed to spread chaos on Earth. Now we see someone approaching the mask, and Dr. Leo tells him to stay away from it. The person quickly steps back, and Dr. Leo starts talking about Loki, saying that Loki brought shame to his father Odin. When the man hears this, he gets very angry and begins to transform, revealing that he is actually Loki himself. Loki steals the mask but discovers that it is fake. He then puts Dr. Leo's face in the place of the mask. Shortly after, the police arrive, and Loki starts shooting at them with his fingers. Suddenly, we see the police going down to the basement. We then move to the place where the real mask is, and we see a dog coming to take the mask. In another scene, we see the dog's owner, named Tim, and his wife, Anya, visiting their friend's house. Tim doesn't like children very much because they cry, and he gets annoyed by their behavior. Anya tells him that she wants to have a child, but Tim is not interested and tries to change the subject. Now we see the dog arriving home with the mask in its mouth. Moments later, Tim and Anya arrive home, and we see Anya upset because Tim doesn't pay attention to her. Tim tries to appease her, but Anya refuses and goes into the room, closing the door. Tim then goes to the dog's room and starts playing with it. The dog brings the mask, and Tim tells it how many times he has warned it not to steal things from the street. Meanwhile, Anya was standing and watching them, feeling jealous of the dog. At this point, we switch to Odin, who is angry with Loki, and Odin tells him about the mask and why he couldn't retrieve it, as it harms people a lot and has special powers. At the same time, we see Tim working on animations, wanting to hold a special exhibition for them. His wife tells him she wants to have a child, but Tim completely rejects the idea. Later, we see Tim dressed in a turtle costume, and his friend Georgie tells him to go to Daniel, who is considered the king of animation, and present his work. Tim starts thinking about it and finally decides to go to Daniel. When he goes, he is nervous and tells Daniel he has a project idea, which is a good idea. However, Daniel doesn't like the idea, and Tim loses hope and returns home, drawing pictures as a gift for his wife. On that day, Tim had a costume party but didn't know what to wear. His wife tells him to wear the mask, and indeed, Tim agrees and takes the mask with him. The mask had a strange energy, and after several attempts, he manages to wear it. As soon as he puts it on, he starts transforming, stepping out of the car with a completely different personality and a strange appearance. He enters the party, and now we see Daniel there. Daniel tells his friend Chad that he's bored and might leave the party. Chad quickly acts and starts singing to improve the mood, but his voice is terrible, ruining the party, and everyone starts leaving. However, Tim starts dancing with the people, creating an exciting party atmosphere. Daniel watches Tim, who keeps changing clothes and behaving strangely. After the party ends, Tim returns home, very happy, and goes to his wife Anya and sleeps with the mask on. The next day, he goes to work, and everyone there greets him and praises what he did at the party last night. At this moment, Daniel calls Tim, and Tim quickly goes to him. Daniel is impressed by what Tim did at the party and says that this is the work he wants, so he decides to promote him. Tim then returns home quickly, looking for the mask. Moments later, Anya arrives home and they both have good news. Tim tells her he got a promotion at work, and Anya tells him she is pregnant. Tim is very happy, but suddenly, bubbles come out of Anya's mouth, and they quickly go to the hospital to do an ultrasound for the baby. During the ultrasound, they see the baby dancing, surprising everyone with this rare behavior. Days and months pass, and Anya gives birth to the baby. Now we see Odin angry with his son Loki, telling him that a new child has been born from the original mask, and you must find the child and bring him quickly. Loki goes to the shop where the mask was supposed to be, but it turns out to be fake, so he gets angry and starts hitting the shop owner. Suddenly, Odin possesses the shop owner's body and tells Loki that they want him to be a good person like his brother, and tells him there is a child born from the mask, and you must find the child and the mask quickly. Meanwhile, we see the mask with the dog, and the dog is sad and upset because Tim has neglected it and is focused on his son. Tim says goodbye to his wife and son and goes to work. Anya blows a balloon for the baby, and the baby imitates her and inflates his head, but she doesn't see him. Loki transforms into a bee and enters the hospital to find out which new babies were born. He goes to the secretary and stings her, taking her place, and starts looking at the names of the new babies. At night, we see Tim and his wife sleeping, and the baby keeps crying, waking Tim up. Tim gets angry with his son and wants to electrocute him, but the baby screams loudly, waking Tim up from his sleep, realizing he was dreaming. When the alarm goes off in the morning, Tim wakes up and starts screaming because he is very angry with his son. Quickly, his wife Anya comes and tells him she will travel for a week, and Tim screams again. During this time, Tim goes to his manager Daniel and tells him he will take a week off to take care of the baby, and Daniel agrees, leaving Chad in his place. Meanwhile, Anya decides to leave, and Tim begs her to take the baby with her. But when she leaves, the baby keeps crying, and Tim is in a very difficult situation, unable to work or calm the baby. After a while, he gets a call from work, saying that manager Daniel wants to see his work before the meeting. Tim agrees and says he will finish the drawings and send them to Daniel in 2 days. The baby says his first word, Mama, and Tim tries to teach him to say Papa, but the baby insists on saying Mama. Suddenly, the baby says Mama, in a strange way, surprising Tim. Now we move to Loki, and we see him impersonating characters to enter homes and search for the child. Then we go back to Tim, who was working, and the child falls, messes up the drawing, and ruins it. Tim gets angry and seats the child, deciding to play cartoons for him. Indeed, the child stays quiet and watches. Now we see the dog trying to put on the mask for the second time, and the child is still watching. We see the dog wearing the mask and starting to transform while the child is watching. The dog keeps looking at the child from the window, imagining getting rid of the child so that Tim and Anya would care for him again. The next day, Tim is seen working, and the child comes in, dancing, singing, and doing cartoon-like moves. The father is shocked by his son, who has super speed and the ability to walk on walls and break doors. Tim is terrified of his son and calls emergency services, but they hang up, thinking it's a prank. Meanwhile, the child continues dancing and singing. Quickly, Tim tells his neighbor about what his son did, but when she looks at the child, she sees that his behavior is normal and he hasn't done anything. Tim is very surprised. We then see Loki continuing his search for the child, and we see the child throwing household items. He grabbed his father from his legs, and he starts hitting him, but suddenly he sees a toy and goes to it. Here, we see the dog setting a trap, and the toy is actually a bomb. But the child is very smart. He turned of the bomb and pretended to be a bomb, making an explosion sound to trick the dog, knowing the dog wants to kill him. Suddenly, the child throws a bone to the dog, which also contains a bomb. The bomb explodes on the dog, scaring him a lot. The dog goes home and starts planning to get rid of the child. Meanwhile, Loki is still searching for the child but can't find him. When the child is watching TV, Tim is terrified of his son because of his childish behavior. Later, Tim sees the dog transformed and faints from shock. Here, the dog begins to execute his plan, but the child is smarter than him, and the dog's plan fails for the second time. The child turns the plan against the dog, causing the dog to fly and fall, dropping the mask. At this moment, we learn that Loki has reached Tim's house, or Tim lets him in. Loki tricks Tim into opening a box, and when he opens it, a trap is revealed. Loki takes the child, who acts normal in front of Loki. When Loki sees that the child's behavior is normal, he leaves him and continues his search. Tim wakes up from fainting, sees the child in front of him, and thinks the child caused everything. He quickly takes the child, gets in his car, and leaves. Loki watches them because he suspects Tim's son. He sees the child doing strange things and confirms that this is the child he is looking for, so he starts following them. Now we see a girl talking to Anya, telling her to come quickly, and we learn that this girl is Anya's spy. Meanwhile, Loki is following Tim, and a police officer tries to stop Loki, but Loki hits him. Then he goes to Tim and says he wants the mask because the child was born from it. Here, Tim understands why the child has superpowers and why he was doing all these things. Before Loki can shoot Tim, Odin enters the police officer's body, trying to stop Loki. Loki escapes and goes after Tim. When he reaches Tim, he throws a giant bomb, but Odin stops it. Here, Loki transforms and decides to eliminate them, but before he can, Odin enters Tim's body and absorbs Loki's power. Tim receives a call from work, telling him he's late for a meeting. When he goes to the company, he's unfortunately fired. At night, Tim talks to his wife, saying that he saved his life and that he's starting to treat him like a real father, loving and feeling comfortable with him. Meanwhile, the dog puts on the mask for the second time. We also learn that Loki has come to their house, wanting to cast a spell to contact Odin. He tells Odin that he found the mask but wants his power back for 1 hour to return the mask to him. Indeed, Loki regains his power. Tim goes to the child and sees Loki inside the child's body. Loki returns to his form and says he has 1 hour to get the mask and take the child. Anya arrives home, and Tim grabs her, thinking she's Loki, but she turns out to be Anya. Tim tells her that the child was kidnapped, thinking the mask is still with the dog. Now we see the dog wearing the mask, going to hang out with another dog. Tim goes to the dog and tells him that the child, when he grows up, he'll be his friend, convincing the dog to give him the mask. On the other hand, we see Loki and Alvi playing together. Suddenly, Tim takes the mask and goes to them, but Loki betrays them, taking the child and the mask. At this moment, the dog arrives just in time and confronts Loki, causing the mask to fall from Loki and land on Tim's face. Tim quickly transforms and starts chasing Loki with his strange car. The road begins to change shape, and Tim quickly catches up to Loki. They both enter into a wrestling match, and the fight begins between them. Each of them starts using strange tricks against the other. In the end, Tim and Loki stop fighting and agree that the child will choose whom to go with. Indeed, they leave the decision to the child. Here, the child decides to go with Loki, and when Tim finds out, he quickly removes the mask. But when he removes the mask, the child changes his mind and returns to his father. Odin arrives and starts scolding Loki for his wrong and evil actions. Tim then goes to him and starts giving fatherly advice. Tim is able to repair the bad relationship between Loki and Odin. After some time, Tim returns to work with a different idea, deciding to create a cartoon about the story of Alvin, his son, and the dog, also telling the story of the strange mask that suddenly entered their lives. Here, the film ends. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to get more new videos. See you next time.